Welcome, everyone. I'm Russell Dalgleish. I'm chairman of Scottish Business Network and managing partner of Exolta. We're here today with Michael and David to talk about some of the challenges and how we overcome them as leaders of a small to medium-sized enterprise. Today, we're going to have the discussion about the subject of working with suppliers, because I believe there's a great opportunity here for us to generate more value from our relationship from the supply chain. But also, we're going to talk about some of the challenges that come in there, and also perhaps a little bit of an insight into what the future is probably going to look like in this area. So I'd first of all like to introduce from Dublin in Scotland, Michael and David. Over to you, Michael. Could you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Russell. Hi, I'm Michael O'Shea. I'm CEO and co-founder of Pulse Market. I'm a long time fintech, exec. I've co-founded a number of businesses. I've run a number of businesses, and yeah, I'm looking forward to the discussion on the supply chain more broadly and how we manage it. And yeah, thanks, Russell.
Thanks, Michael. And over to you, David.
Hi, I'm David Lewis. I'm Managing Director of Lewis Creative, a digital marketing agency based in Edinburgh. Again, we are challenged with our supply chain procurement and just generally, how do we stand out and make our business more successful?
Thanks very much, guys. So I've run businesses up to about 200 staff. And I'd have regular monthly board meetings, and we'd discuss various different subjects. And it wasn't until 2008 I started to think about suppliers and which suppliers were critical to us. The reason for that was because we hit the financial crisis and suddenly we were looking at cost cutting. So suddenly it was a need to go through who are all the suppliers, what services do they provide, do we need them? How secure are they at continuing the supply, particularly the critical ones, while this economic turmoil is going on? And it was such an eye-opener for me, because what I realized was that as an SME, we didn't really manage our suppliers. We had individual people in the business who had relationships with them, and each supplier was set up on our finance system to ensure invoices were paid. But it was such an eye-opener for me, and it changed the way I thought about suppliers. And since then, I've always tried to build relationships with the people who are suppliers to my business, because they can also be sales agents for me. Because if they understand what I'm doing, they can tell other people. We might get a deal that way. So that kind of was my starting point. But I know you've got some great stories, David, of the phone going and then having to do a quick review of suppliers.
Thanks. So yeah, so just smiling all the way through that, because I'm sure every business owner and not every business has the same challenge. The story that came to mind was exactly that: the phone ringing in a lovely sunny day, and life's going well. And what happens? One of your big clients, a big international brand, comes and says, "Hey, David, head of procurement, could you give me your list of supply chain?" I was like, "Yeah, sure. Is that the ones that we deal with you and your contract?" No, all of them. And do you think, surely I could do that? Surely that's easy enough. Yeah, I'll maybe next week, a couple of weeks' time, we'll get it. No, I need it by 5 o'clock. We need to put this into the system to get you validated to take you into the next stage, or no, something. And you, okay, put the phone down, and chaos ensues after that. No, I then grab the directors of the business, pull them together. So I've got HR director, technical director, I've got the client service director, finance director. Guys, we've got some of these key clients or suppliers in this database. We know we've got their due diligence, or one or two. We know what services they offer, one or two. But all of them in one place, validated, accredited, tick boxes. So we kind of start with finance, because they always pipe up, well, it's in zero. No, we can export that, and you get a great starting point. Hopefully that'll be the end of it. And then technical director asks, what data points do you want? I'll put it in a spreadsheet, I'll hold it in an Excel or Access database. And you're like, this is getting a bit much. And of course, client services start thinking, why do they want this information? They start having fear and worry, and is it to do with the contract? And they go off. So what do we get as an export? normally the finance team's email or a finance mailbox. We've got no direct contact to supplies a service, and name, address, not often the key address, but maybe the finance address, and a company number, VAT number, etc. Nothing that's got to be auditable, nothing's got to be validated. So then we hunt around all day. We kind of look at, well, how do we grade these people? How do we know what's the risk to this business? What's the risk to the client? How much do they spend with us? And to cut a long story short, we fight and we put something together in an Excel spreadsheet and it's there. And we take a deep breath and we email that to the client. Here you go. That Excel spreadsheet is now out of date. Tomorrow, somebody goes bust, that's out of date. Somebody has a new accreditation, that list out of date. We're needing to manage this in Excel. Zero don't do it for us. And the more we're asked for by procurement to be doing our due diligence, being validated, we need something to put this in place. And again, it's the effort and time our whole team takes. That's chaos ensued by one call when they're not doing the business we should be doing.
Yeah. I so identify with that, David. I get the hairs on the back of my neck because I can remember spending 6 months every week visiting a huge multinational public sector organisation in London with my operations. It was me, my operations director, and a large lever arch folder, and we would go every week to go through this. And it was a nightmare, but we managed to show the fact that we could do it, but the level of investment was just ridiculous. And then from 2008, we then had to repeat it again when we got to the stage for GDPR, because we had to go out again and do that.
And actually, you mentioned GDPR, but a question about ESG, David, I think you've mentioned it before, but that's very focused and topical, not just ESG, because that's very specific to the financial services sector, but more broadly, sustainability and net zero and carbon emissions. To what extent do you see that coming through as you engage with clients? Or the other action area of focus there is staff engagement in terms of what are you doing as an organization that I should be proud of being part of with respect to ESG or sustainability?
I think there's definitely after COP26, there's definitely a highlight of one of the early stage questions in any procurement or supplier audit is, are your supply chain, do they have some credentials in this space? Yes, no. What are they? And again, there's a grey area because most people don't know. Is it EcoVadis? Is it Disruption House kind of qualifications? Or is it just that, yeah, we've done an internal audit, which has got no real value to it. I think taking a step back though, Michael, the challenge that we seem to face is that as a business, we have great data points. We've got systems to run our project management. We've got systems to run our timekeeping. We've got systems to do our invoicing, taking timesheets into invoicing, all slick. We've got production scheduling systems. We've got Zero and all these other things. But there's a big blank hole, gap where we've got no clear data or product to manage our supply chain, and exactly that. Are they accredited? Have the ISOs? Do they have ESG accreditations? No. Where's the risk? No. Have they done due diligence with us? Tick, 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 tick. No. And as a SME, we're asked to do that for our big corporate clients. But it's now coming down the line, we need to take that action for ourselves. Yeah. What do you do?
And actually, the other thing that comes to mind is the recessionary times we all feel like we're heading into. One of the things in conversations I'm in with, as a startup, we end up in lots of founders forum type communities of other fintech companies, but actually getting your house in order and finding those suppliers, or what are those suppliers that you're paying that you don't necessarily understand what the business case was originally, who was the person in the organization who had the relationship, and is that still valid today, and how do you go about understanding who your suppliers are, what the costs are, and where you can prune or consolidate to reduce costs?
Absolutely, and what I'm seeing happening as well is the fact that we've seen it through COVID, whereby people have got very elongated supply chains across the world, and that really brought to mind the fact that our supply chains are actually absolutely fundamentally critical to our business. And if we don't have the capability to have some alternate routes to move physical product, our business could fall over because we can't get the necessary product to build the line item. But also in my businesses, which tend to be more on the technology side, we'll have that zero system for finance. We have HubSpot or something for the CRM. We have the project management software. But we're managing suppliers as a financial instrument. So we're doing it as the way to process invoices. And what I discovered was once you start doing an analysis with a company, perhaps as Exolta, if we go in to do an evaluation of a new client, you actually go through that supply chain and you go, do you know you've got suppliers who could potentially be customers? You have suppliers who are also supplying people who could be potential customers. And there are relationships there and understandings there whereby it leads to more collaborative opportunities. But because the relationship is done at an invoice to finance stage, it's pay and bill. We're speaking to the invoice people at their side, and we're not having the bigger discussion. So I'm encouraging the companies that I'm doing now to get more into this area to understand it. And also, I think you made the very critical point there that we're going to see legislation coming through, which is going to put the kind of pressure that we see on multinationals to validate their supply chain. All companies are going to do that. Now, we know the legislation, for example, is coming along in Scotland, whereby we're going to look for that carbon footprint, not only of your company,
Yeah.
of your suppliers, and we're going to require systems and processes to control that. And that's why I've been so taken by what you've been doing with Pulse, Michael, whereby it's providing that capability.
Yeah, actually, one of the things that came up quite recently and regularly was we all woke up at some point in the last 6 months wanting to know how many of our suppliers were doing business or had some engagement in Russia. And the question was, well, actually, I have no idea what the story is there. And the number of people looking, scrambling to try to figure out where they stood in respect of that issue was kind of eye-opening. But there's more that you need to understand about your suppliers, whether it's, again, the other very topical issue. I know I'm kind of focused a little bit on ESG, but the number of your suppliers that have minority ownership or have female CEOs. I mean, these are kinds of information that we need to understand and need to do better at, or we'll fail when we turn around to clients and look to meet their standards around ESG. Or
it's interesting because I think it's not even so much us failing, it's the fact we're probably underselling. The fact that we have our supply chain, we have a strong relationship with our supply chain or our suppliers, and that actually augments the service that we're going to deliver.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to see more and more because, since we started this discussion a couple of weeks ago, I've been thinking about not only who my suppliers are, but who their critical suppliers are. So
Absolutely.
You understand the whole chain and being able to map that and understand it's going to become more and more critical.
Well, actually, David, you and I both share a common supplier in the IT services area. And I know I sent you a note recently, but we're struggling to engage with that supplier to get them to answer basic information security questions that allow us to tick the box and have our house in order as we proceed to get ISO 27001 certified and just be match fit for the kind of financial firms that we want as clients. But that's indicative to me of a bigger problem of communication between suppliers and their clients around InfoSec. You mentioned Russell GDPR. I know I've mentioned ESG a few times, but across the different segments of an RFP or a DDQ, there are elements of those that we want to understand about our suppliers that we just don't know today, and don't know in a way that's easily repeatable and scalable. And it just takes, you mentioned the meeting and the files that you had under arm, but it's just our spreadsheets. It's just a lot of effort, a lot of manual effort, and a lot of risk if it's Joe or Jane in the corner with a spreadsheet and they have an understanding of everything, and Joe or Jane goes out and, God forbid, gets knocked down by a bus or goes and gets another job, perhaps. You're exposed because you just don't have a centralized location to manage that data. Sorry.
Yeah. Michael, just to interject there, one of the things, we manage our big supplier relationships reasonably well, not as well as we could do, as Russell said, but the scary thing is when you do the audit of all your suppliers, software is a big thing at the moment. Now, we're buying small pieces of software that have to sit into your system that are used for servers or updates or tools like Zoom or Teams or whatever, and all these little things, and people are buying them on credit cards. No due diligence process is done. They're not put in any spreadsheet. They're not managed in any way. And I did it recently, got every single spend and every single credit card. Who is JDX, computing services? And somebody says, oh, that's where we get a database from. And you're like, really? What does it do? No, is that at risk? No, who's it for? We've always used it. What do you mean we've always used it? Okay, it might only be like £200 a year or £500 a year. But these are the little nuggets, like you say. Where's that service? Who are they? What do they do? Where are we buying it from? Russia? Or are we buying it from the UK? Is it Europe? That's where the net gets wider and the scare factor comes in.
I had that exact example multiplied because I identified at one point with a London company, there was 4 different operational heads or business unit heads who were all buying services from the same supplier, but we're all doing it directly with the supplier. So in effect, we were missing out on an opportunity to go to the supplier and get a bigger discount because of the level of spend. And it's those types of Edith, we would never do that in a sales process. We would always track our CRM to make sure we're not got 4 different people all speaking to the same client.
Yeah.
And I think this is the revolution that's coming, is getting that control in place is going to be a game changer, as well as probably critical to the survival of our businesses.
Absolutely.
And Russell, that survival, we have went through numerous changes to make our business really agile and dynamic. If somebody asked us tomorrow, could you give me the total spend on this client for a month, 6 weeks, 2 years? I can give you a number of hours, what department it worked on. I can give you all that data. The challenge we have is that earlier example. Can you do that for your suppliers? Do you have that instantly, every single one of them? Ooh, that's a challenge.
Great stuff. So what we're looking for from these talks is to get more insight from others about how they go about doing this and controlling it. And Michael, when we look at Pulse and the technology that we're using today, where do you see this going? Where do you see the relationship with the supplier deepening and giving us more value to the client?
Well, as there's a transformation in how the suppliers are managed by the SME, because the bigger corporates maybe are a little bit ahead of us in this, but the SME, as we've alluded to earlier in the kind of conversation, is typically individual to individual. It's through email and attachments, and it's just not managed and centralized in a way that's easily accessible and where you can leverage it for opportunities to engage those suppliers. One of the things you talked about, Russell, a little bit earlier was leveraging your suppliers, the relationships you have. Those suppliers want you to succeed because you'll do more business with them, they hope. And so for you to leverage your suppliers in a way that's just not being done today because they're being ignored. So the digitization transformation of that relationship between a buyer and his or her suppliers, centralizing that, organizing that so that it's more efficient, that in a timely manner we're re-engaging with suppliers when the contract ends. And now I've heard a fairly big financial firm, tier 1 financial firm, I should say, made the comment that if my suppliers are smart enough not to hike up the price too much at the end of the contract period, we're too disorganized. We've too little handle or control over suppliers to figure out that we should be going back out to tender. We should be going back out to keep them keen, even if we keep them as a supplier. We should be going back out to see if there's better, more interesting, more up-to-date, more dynamic suppliers that we should be considering in their place. But because they were disorganized, and I think that was true of the tier 1 financial firm, but it's true of most of the SMEs, the supplier just stays there and continues to deliver the service year after year if we don't actually take the trouble to put it back out to tender and look at it. So that digitization transformation, where we centralize, digitize the relationship, get rid of email, get rid of attachments, get rid of the manual Joe or Jane in the corner who's managing it all, and actually have control business to business between our company and our suppliers, and then furthermore see through to their suppliers. That's where the direction of travel. And it creates great opportunity if you have control of that supply chain.
I think that's a great point. So optimizing the use of technology, because if we're running a multinational business, I've got a procurement department. I've got individuals and they're using systems to control that.
Yeah.
But when I'm at a smaller company, an SME, I don't have that, and it's going to fall into someone's plate. But I think I would be urging anyone watching this this is a board level subject, and it's worth having that as a line item at your board, just to ask the question, what are we doing in this space at the moment? Do we feel confident that we have control, etc.? And start that review process, and then go out to look at technology such as Pulse or whatever that can actually come in and add value there. And I would be encouraging anyone to do that now, because if we are correct that we're looking at a tightening economic situation, you're going to have to do it anyway. So I'd get in now to do that and get that understanding. And that's a key point David made as well, is for what can appear smaller spend, £200-300 a month, if we've got enough of those within our business, all with different suppliers that are getting paid through credit cards and actually going through the expenses system, that's a real weakness or risk to our business.
Absolutely.
David, what would your final thoughts be on advice to someone who's looking at this area, hasn't really considered it actually?
I think, no, ask yourself that question. If somebody did ask you, can you deliver all your supply chain in a day? What would it take for your business to do that? And then I'm always looking for that next step. I want to be the company that can say, David, can you do this? Yes, here it is instantly. How's it managed? Here's how it's managed. And it is total control, like everything else we do in the business. I don't want to, as Michael said, rummage around and generate an Excel spreadsheet and throw that and go, that might do for today. That's not good enough anymore. It's a digital age we're working in where everything should be dynamic and updated. So we need to move to that.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. That's been excellent. And I look forward to getting the feedback on this particular session. Thank you.
Thanks, Russell. Thanks, David.
Thank you, Russell. Thank you, Michael.